My question is when you said when you're lined up with source energy, you croak, you die, you're in the vortex. And if you're in the vortex, then there would be nothing beyond that. Please tell me what happened with Jesus. Because there is such controversy. He was in the vortex and he was done and he never came back. And I just have so many questions. I feel so connected to Jesus in a way that I can't explain, that my heart sings, and I don't know what that's about.
Well, we have some questions for you about that. Do you believe that, first of all, does it resonate with you that you are an eternal being?
Yes.
And do you think that's true of Jesus?
Absolutely.
And does it make sense to you that even though you're here in this physical body, or even though he was here in a physical body, does it make sense to you that the larger part of you is non-physical?
Yes.
Does it make sense to you that while you are in your physical body, you have access to all of that?
Yes.
Does it make sense to you that while you're in your physical body, you, by virtue of what you're thinking, could be in or out of the vortex? It could go either way, and that you have control over it. Does it make sense to you from the scanty part of the story of his life that you have actually been able to hear? Does it make sense to you that he was not so different from you in the sense that there were things that he focused upon that took him into the vortex and allowed the clarity? In other words, when you sat before him dripping your illness and he held you as his object of attention, he did not allow himself to see your illness. Instead, he knew the wholeness of you because he was in the vortex where he could see all that you had become. And he trained himself not to be distracted. Do you think that he was always that way? Do you hear the story of how he left his village and went somewhere they knew not where and was gone for some period of time? Do you know where he was?
No, where was he?
He was off learning how to get into the vortex. He was off learning how to meditate. He was learning to control his mind. He was distracted from the trauma of his village off to himself, turning into the vibration of the wholeness of who he is, so that from inside the vortex he could see the wholeness. That's why when he returned, while he did not always stay in the vortex, once he integrated back into his society, he had trained himself so that he could predominantly be in the vortex. Do you think he was in the vortex the day they nailed him up?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, what's your guess?
No.
Is that not a powerful message that he would bring? In other words, if you could hear him, what he was saying is, I'm not different from you. The kingdom of heaven that you are all looking for over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, isn't over there, isn't over there, it's over here. The kingdom of heaven is within you. It is a vibrational place. You tune into it. Everyone is an extension of it, you see. When you wait for him to come back, do you understand that that's what is flowing to all of you? In other words, it's physical humans who stand outside the vortex and write this stuff always get it wrong. Helpful?
Very helpful. Did he resurrect, like come up back from the dead like the Bible says, or did he pull a fast one and go down the aisle or down the alleyway and somebody took his place? I'm just really curious.
He reemerged into non-physical, as each and every one of you will. He became source energy, as each and every one of you are. Reemerges back into physical experience, as each and every one of you are doing. In other words, he was not an anomaly. He was not an anomaly, and yet all the things that you want to believe about him are accurate. In other words, but they are accurate of you as well.
Thank you.
You see, sometimes you find those symbols that you use as mile markers or goalposts for yourself. And certainly there's a lot of that happening there. But then humans distort the stories beyond the laws of the universe. And then when they cannot achieve the same distortion, then it makes the story all the much more unusual, until you hold as your example something that wasn't, something that isn't, and something that couldn't be, and then you use that to club yourself about the head with. You say, we're not walking on water yet. We haven't got it. And we say, this is a vibrational place. In other words, Esther met someone years ago who was going to meditate. And when Esther visited with her, she said, yes, every day we levitate. And Esther said, really? You all levitate? And she said, yes. But when Esther looked in the little window of the room where they were all levitating, they weren't levitating. They were all sitting on the floor. But if Esther had been in the room with them, she would have had the experience of levitation with them. In other words, you have to be in the vortex. You have to be up to speed with who you really are, you see. And so what Jesus' primary message is that he was the extension of source energy. It was translated in many different ways. It's translated that he was the Son of God, eventually the only Son of God. In other words, it got more and more distorted as time goes by. But there was nothing that he was saying then or would say to you now that is different than what you are hearing here. And you can tell by the resonance that you feel within you when you find a piece of something that the source within you agrees with. We are not wanting to go back into history and rewrite any books. It's not necessary. What we want you to do is to find the feeling place of where you are, acknowledge that there is a larger part of you that you have expanded to, and then feel yourself into resonance with who you are. We want to empower you to your own guidance system. And when you do, while you will continue to love and appreciate this one that you know as Jesus, you won't hold him on a pedestal that you have not yet achieved. You will see him as a partner in creation. You will feel the equality of that which you all are. You will feel the fullness. You will never really know who he is until you achieve that same vibration, you see. Don't make yourself separate and apart from him. Don't hold him in a category in your mind or on a pedestal that is unreachable for you. That was never his message. And that's why when you tell the story in that way, it always feels the way it does in your gut. It's bogus. It's off, you see. When you hear the stories of love, when you hear the parables, when you listen to the way he cared about others, sometimes you feel all full of yourself, because in the reading or the hearing of that, you come into alignment with who you are. But the majority of the story, the part that's most emphasized about this blessed being who came to teach, to uplift you all to the same alignment, the majority of the story that is told is about the day that he was not in the vortex. And then all of the stories that you then have to tell in order to make that fit, and that make that fit, and then make that fit, and then make that fit. And before you know it, everybody says, I believe, but nobody knows what they're believing because nobody feels it.
The question I have, and it is my resistance, I'm fully aware of that, and I struggle, and I love what you say.
Well, now, keep beating the drum. I haven't been able to hear. I've never been able to hear. I probably will not ever hear. I've listened and listened and listened. Maybe you want to do a little different preface to this. I'm sitting here in the vortex of source energy. I've been listening. I can feel myself into the vortex. I'm resonating with the fullness of who I am. I feel great clarity as I sit out there. I can hear the things that you say. I think this is an environment where I can maybe take this thought beyond where it has been before. Maybe it's been there for me and I've just missed it, but today I'd like to highlight it in a way that it asks the question in a very poignant way so that I and others may hear it in a new way, and then I want to relax and hear the answer to it.
I like that.
Much
Thank
better
you.
setup.
Much better. Took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you. Okay, it's the big K, the big karma. I have listened to many recordings.
What's big about that?
It's the unknown. It's the idea of a lot of different philosophies and religions, and I love what I hear, and it resonates. And you have said there is karma, but you can't go into it.
Oh, we've gone into it many times. We just go into it more quickly than you do, and we never give you the answer you want to hear, so you don't think you've heard the answer. But here we have some questions for you, just to set this up as a platform so that you can hear what's going to come next.
Sure.
So, do you acknowledge that you are here in this physical body?
Yes.
That was easy. And do you acknowledge that here in this physical body, you are an extension of non-physical energy?
Yes.
And do you agree that while you are here in this physical body, in all this realness, that the larger part of you still remains non-physically focused?
Yes.
And do you acknowledge that the emotions you feel are the barometer of the way those two vibrational aspects are playing off of one another? Do you agree, or do you acknowledge, or does it sort of feel right to you that when you feel negative emotion about something, that it means you're thinking about it in a way that the source within you is not thinking about it?
Absolutely.
In other words, you can tell that you have strayed from your true knowing.
Yes.
And the reason that you feel negative emotion then is because, as we said earlier, your inner being is not crawling out of the vortex to be with you. Your inner being is holding firm to who you have become and coaxing you into the vortex. And if there's going to be any alignment, you got to come in there and make the alignment. So, if your inner being will not join you in even one negative thought, what do you think the odds are that you'd been sent back into a lifetime to fix something that you screwed up last time? That was big. So, what makes people assume that there's something karmic that they're compensating for? Well, it's easy to understand how they'd get there. They innately believe that they are good. They want to be good. They know that they want stuff that they can't get. And they're outside the vortex trying to make it happen, through words and action. Not lining up with the energy that will allow it to happen, but struggling really hard to make it happen. And finally they just get weary and they say, oh, don't tell me that I create my own reality. I don't want to hear that because I've wanted that for a long, long time. Don't tell me that when I ask it is given. If that's true, then where's my stuff? I've been asking. I don't think it's been being given. And then to explain why when they innately know that it should be going better for them and it isn't, then they come up with all of the screwiest explanations about why things aren't going better. It's my mother's fault. It's the government's fault. It's my husband's fault. It's my wife's fault. It's my child's fault. It's the fault of karma. I must have done something screwy in a past life and now I'm coming back to do it again, you see. And so that's the reason that we don't talk about karma in the way that most people mean it. There is nothing in anything that we know that even remotely resembles what most people mean when they talk about karma. Now, are you an eternal being? Yes. So that's kind of karmic. Okay. Are you source energy at the same time that you're here? Yes. So that's sort of karmic. Do you come back and have other experiences? Yes. But every time, see, here's how it works. So here you are in this physical body, knowing what you do want, knowing what you don't want, asking for more. And we've been talking all day here today about closing the gap. Hopefully while you're here in this physical body, but some don't. Some just get more and more and more of a spread between who they're letting themselves be and who they are. And then they have their closing of the gap during that releasing into the non-physical, what you call the death experience. But once reemerged back into non-physical, they now stand as the culmination of all that life has caused them to be. All that they were before they were in this body and all that they've been since. You are an expanding being, an expanding consciousness, an expanding energy. Yes, yes, yes. And when you make your decision to come back again, and you will because it's great fun. This is the leading edge. This is where it's at. This is where the expansion begins and ends, if you will allow it. You come from this framework of who you are. You, in this time-space reality, are putting all kinds of things into this vortex of creation that future generations will benefit from. But it doesn't need to only be future generations. You all could get into the vortex now if you would use the power of your mind to get in there, and you could benefit from it right here and now. But if you don't, it doesn't matter because who you really are has become that, and when you reemerge into physical again, you will come from that vantage point. Haven't you noticed that about the children that are coming forth? Don't they just know stuff? Don't they know stuff? Esther visits with her grandchildren and she can hardly believe that they know stuff she just learned from Abraham. I just learned that and you were born knowing that? You see.
I'm a youth minister. So I experience that every
So is that helpful? In other words, if you want to call it karma, it doesn't matter what there is this eternal wheel of life that is spinning, and you will never be finished with your expansion, with your joyful expansion. But it is our promise to you that you are not sent here to fix things that are broken. You're never come forth to compensate for things that you did in an inappropriate way before. You come forth as genius, consciousness, wanting vividly to explore contrast and put thought in new places and come into alignment with it.
That's wonderful.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Very good.